Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, deja vu all over again. Is it time to finally end the mask mandates? Why does Craig Rice want to force menu choices for children at county restaurants? And more cops or counselors. How to stop the rising school violence. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We are joined by former county council member Mike Knapp and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. This past Thursday, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan joined the chorus of several other governors that recognized that the 2-year COVID pandemic is effectively over. And he called for an end to the mask mandates. Mike, even governors in heavily blue states like New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and New York have called for the end of the mask mandates. Hogan is an unusual company here, but is it time for us to do away with our masks?
I think we're certainly close. I don't know if the pandemic is over. Hopefully we're on the verge of making it endemic. Obviously, it's not going away. We're going to continue to have COVID in some capacity, but clearly we're getting to vaccination rates with Omicron and people having exposure to that. We're certainly in the ballpark. I just saw prior to getting on this reporting that the State Board of Education responded to Governor Hogan by saying that each school district had the discretion once they achieved 80% vaccination rates within their schools or within their community. I think it's still good for us to have some benchmarks. I think obviously though, if we're going to have benchmarks, then we should probably adhere to those benchmarks, which has been a challenge, I think, in Montgomery County, that we're at 85% plus vaccination, and yet we're still not past the masks. And so I think we're getting close. And I think it obviously changes from community to community given levels of vaccination rates. But I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm not sure it's a train right now, which is kind of cool.
Well, we would welcome a bright light at the end of the tunnel. So, Mark, Governor Hogan also called for the end of mask mandates in schools, and Mike was just commenting on that as well. But predictably, County Executive Mark Elrich responded that it was just too soon. Why is the county executive so reluctant to take this step?
Well, candidly, I think part of it is this unfortunate politicization that has taken place over a lot of these issues. And therefore, Montgomery will probably be the last county standing in terms of dropping it, even as you've mentioned, a number of other blue jurisdictions have already dropped it. You know, it's really unfortunate. We've talked a lot about the science of all of this, and unfortunately, all too often, what we've confused is reliance on experts, the best judgment that experts had based on the information they had at a particular time for the science. And that's not precisely the same thing. And as a result, I'm afraid that the credibility of experts or science as expressed by experts has really declined a lot during this COVID, because that distinction just has not been made.
Well, I think what's more significant also is the fact that the public, I think, is suffering from mask fatigue. There seems to be in all of the general polling a great desire to do away with masks on the part of most people, and they certainly want to do away with mask mandates. They don't. I think what the polls are showing is that if you feel uncomfortable and you want to wear a mask, you should be allowed to. But if not, let me live my life the way I want to. Mike, what do you think about all of that?
No, I think we're certainly getting to that point. We've been wearing masks for 2 years. Although, and I think it's interesting. I know that there's a general frustration, and I don't particularly like wearing my mask. That being said, it's become kind of a state of nature. And so I was really interested. I walked down the street the other day, and people were even outside, and everyone had their mask on because it's just become kind of a way that we operate. And so I don't think it's I'm struck by the people who have taken this profound disliking and notion that I can't believe I have to wear a mask. That being said, sure, I think we're past a point of having to mandate this, and I think people are frustrated and want to be able to move to a point where I no longer have to wear a mask. But I don't think it's the be all and the end all that some have made it to be.
So Mark, I think what the mask has become the symbol for most people. I mean, what was reflective a week or so, 2 weeks ago in the Johns Hopkins study is that the actual shutdown and lockdown of our communities had really a de minimis effect on the spread, on halting the spread of COVID. And I think people will, start to read things like that. They see that Omicron was contagious, whether you were vaccinated, triple vaccinated, wore your masks, or wore a tent when you walked around. So has the public attitude changed? And is it the political science? We got an election year coming up.
Right.
Is that the real issue?
Well, I mean, you put your finger on that. All of this has triggered a considerable amount of skepticism. Again, this notion that the science dictated particular responses when things change. We learn new data, more information came in. That Johns Hopkins, I'm surprised that Johns Hopkins study has not gotten even more attention than it has. They're a very credible institution. That is pretty compelling evidence.
I think it's really interesting, though, Mark. You raise a really good point that we've really gotten to a point where people are you have to be right or wrong. And the challenge with something like this is we know more as we proceed. And as we learn more, we should make better, more informed decisions. And yet we've tried to take this approach of undermining the credibility of people who are trying to make decisions and lead us on a pathway. And I think that's one of the things that we are going to suffer from a long time.
Right. Well, thank you, guys. I mean, I think we're all anxious to see the end of the COVID pandemic and hopefully the end of the lockdowns and the mandates. And I want to go on to our next topic, which, I'm one of those people that I just hate being told what to do. And now term limited and outgoing Councilmember Craig Rice has introduced a bill before the county council that would require restaurants and food service facilities in the county to provide at least one healthy meal option for children. I mean, what's wrong with chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese, for God's sakes? Mark, for years on end, we have seen the fast food industry voluntarily promote healthy eating choices, and universally, they fail because people want to choose what they want to eat. Obesity may be a problem in the United States, but is it the responsibility of the restaurants to cure it?
Well, this is an example of just overly prescriptive legislation that just does not hit the mark at all. That's not the way. This is not the way to address obesity. If anything, it's being able to cook healthy meals at home as opposed to at restaurants, and it's really ill-considered and in the wrong response to what is a real problem.
Look, I remember when I had kids and I took them to a restaurant, I didn't order them the green beans and the lima beans. Right. I ordered them something that I knew they would eat and not throw a stink fit and embarrass me in front of everybody else. So I don't get it. So Mike, I want to bring in a different thought here because I think it plays into the idea that government is the solution for everything. Just recently, Democratic Congressman Jim Cooper of Tennessee announced his retirement. And he gave this warning to his party. The Democratic Party is addicted to telling people what to think. You can't really win many elections if you are that self-righteous. Now, maybe in a one-party county like Montgomery County, you can get away with some of this, but eventually, people's attitudes change. Is this a message that the county council should take under consideration, and will they?
Well, will they is always going to be an interesting question. It is an election year, so we'll see how that evolves. I guess the one piece I would say as it relates to Congressman Cooper is at least the Democratic Party acknowledges that people can think. I think as I look at what the RNC has said over the course of the past week or so, really thinking isn't even a part of the equation. It's just, acknowledging your loyalty to Donald Trump. And pretty much once you get past that, will things modify in Montgomery County, and will we become more aware, and rather than telling people what to do, actually kind of provide them and guide them and lead them, as opposed to just extolling our virtues? I don't know. I hope that we will, but at least we acknowledge that people can think, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, gazpacho to you, my friend. I think
I was going to say, I think the virtual signaling that takes place on the left has created very much a reaction on the right, sort of almost an allergic reaction to it, and has contributed in no small measure to the kind of overall polarization that takes place. We're really referencing it with the conversation about COVID, that, because of the lack of credibility in the experts have with a lot of people, you almost have an allergic reaction that says they must be wrong all the time, right. Even when frankly they're giving very sound opinions. So this is, I think, a broader question of people just not having faith anymore in what they're hearing.
Well, I think you're right again. I think you're right again there, Mark. It's this notion of we have put markers in the ground that if you're on this side, we believe this to be right, and the other side, we believe this to be right, and anything that doesn't align to that is wrong. And we've created no place in the middle to actually have discourse.
Well,
that's how these things evolve.
I'm actually encouraged by some little signs that I'm seeing in our county council. I think the new council president, Gabe Alvarez, has done a very good job of guiding the council in the first several months. I mean, we avoided the COVID passport at a time when the Omicron was starting to end. And I think there are little signs that there are some reasonable members in the council that do listen to people and do listen to the constituents. Although I'm always worried in an election year that the legislature has to do something because they want to make themselves look like they justify their existence.
Right.
So that you never had to do that, Mike, I'm sure.
I think you're right. No, I think Gabe and Evan actually are doing a very nice job of kind of moderating. And I think they recognize that that's going to be really important, especially going into an election year. And I think they're doing a nice job of just saying, okay, let's take a second here and think this all the way through. And I think that's the right kind of leadership going into an election year. And so I'm appreciative. I agree with you. I think there are some good signs.
Thanks, guys. When we come back from this short break, cops or counselors, how to stop the growing violence in Montgomery County Public Schools. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Violence in Montgomery County schools, particularly high schools, has risen to such a degree that this week in a meeting of the council's Education and Cultural Committee and Public Safety Committee, it was described as an all hands on deck problem. Mike, in December, WUSA 9 News reported that there had been 40 assault cases in the fall semester inside our schools. Now, students say when they were asked about this that more counselors are needed, but parents seem to want more police and a return to the police in school program. What's the solution?
Well, as we've been discussing on this show so far, it's not binary. The reality is we probably need both. You're taking students who have not been in a social environment for a year and a half. We're trying to reintegrate them, and I think that's a challenge. And I think you're trying to figure at a time when they're learning and growing. And I think having access to more counselors is going to be a very worthwhile thing. That being said, there are also going to be situations where we've seen in the last few weeks where access to a police officer quickly is going to be really important. And to know that you've got a district station 2 miles down the road isn't going to solve that problem. And so I think the reality is going to be training police officers probably differently to be able to respond differently to situations, but increasing counselors in schools is going to be really important. And increasing counselors generally, no matter where you are, I think is going to be important. And so it's not binary, it's going to be yes.
Okay. Mark, when you look at the makeup of the county council and their public comments regarding this problem, there seems to be somewhat of a split on the county council. Will Jawando, who pushed to have the Cops in School program dismantled, is not changing his opinion, but there seems to be a split on the council as to what to do.
Well, and let me just pick up on what Mike said. In a crisis situation, in an emergency, a counselor it may well not be the most effective tool. You need somebody that can step in to protect the safety of everyone else. And there's a time and place for counselors, but in an emergency situation, as we have seen, a distressing increase in, it's appropriate to have a law enforcement respond and take the situation and to remove the threat, remove the danger that exists. Let me just pick up. We have seen an increase in the incidents. I'm not sure that's related to the change in officer status as much as it is, as Mike mentioned, COVID and kids who were not being socialized and were not interacting, coming back in together, and that's turned into a volatile mix in multiple jurisdictions, and is a real problem. And again, not to come back to COVID again, but to come back to COVID, our first topic, we're going to be dealing with the consequences of some of the choices that were made for quite some time, and we still don't know the full impact.
I guess I'd question that, Mark, because we're talking about teenagers who seem to be acting out, and not younger students. They certainly socialize after school and other places. I don't know what causes the difference just because they're back in person learning.
Well, actually, the data is that they're socializing to a considerably less degree than they were when they were regularly going to school. And that's an important part of growing up and an important part of that process that we do in the school.
Well, and I think candidly that we talked about this earlier. This notion of absolute right and absolute wrong, and what do you do when people are on the other side? And we're seeing adults who theoretically know how to behave better doing this in airplanes and in other social environments because they're acting out and lashing out. So when you take a 16, 17-year-old student who is trying to kind of see this and is looking at those types of things, has been in a home environment and hasn't necessarily processed all that for the last 2 years, I think you're going to see challenges, and I think that's what we're seeing in most of our schools today.
Well, it's a disturbing problem to see the growing amount of violence, and you're right. Both of you I think are correct. There's not a one solution fits all program that will solve the problem. We're going to go on to our last topic, which you can tell by the way we've the topics I chose today. I care a lot about food, and before we go to parting shots, we need to grill, quote unquote, the panel on the upcoming Super Bowl. And of course, question one is, what are your favorite foods? And here are some choices: brisket or pulled pork?
Well, I'm a brisket guy.
Pulled pork.
Pulled pork. I'm a both guy. No surprise, right? Hummus or guacamole?
Oh, I like them both, but in this instance, I'd probably go with hummus.
Okay.
Oh God, we're like matched here. Guacamole.
Okay. And here's the $64 question. And wings or pizza?
Well, we're both upstate New Yorkers, so
yeah,
I'm a wings guy.
Yeah, I grew up in Buffalo, and when I was 5 or 6, I was not far from Frank and Teresa's, where buffalo chicken wings were invented. So no, definitely wings.
Well, I was up in Buffalo for a wedding a couple of years ago and went there, Mark, to pay homage to the birth of the buffalo wings. So great choices. Actually, there's nothing. Wednesday, for those who didn't know and who want to catch up, Wednesday was National Pizza Day. So I think in honor of that, I'll say both. All right. Well, here's the final question: Bengals or Rams?
I like the Joe Burrow Bengals story. I think it's great, and it'd be good to see them win a Super Bowl.
Being a Buffalo guy or boy, I gotta go with the AFL team. Those old loyalties between the two leagues, I guess they die hard.
Well, I go on the question of since I have no dog in this fight, I go on a question of who's got the better unis, and I like the Bengals uniform better. So I'm going with the Bengals on this one.
Going to be interesting though. They said it's going to be the hottest Super Bowl ever. So be curious to see how that plays into the outcome.
Well, when you consider that they had the coldest NFC championship game in Green Bay 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, it'll be a nice contrast. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Thank you, Casey. We're at an exciting time in Montgomery County. For the last year or so, we've had interim leaders in both of our significant educational institutions. Dr. Charlene Dukes has been our interim president at the college, and Dr. Manifa McKnight has been the interim superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools. And coming now, we will now have Dr. Manifa McKnight as our full permanent superintendent, as she's been selected this week. And so congratulate her. And Dr. Jermaine Williams will be joining Montgomery College at the end of February as our new president there. And so hopefully as we've come out of COVID, we can move past this interim status and really get into moving education forward in Montgomery County again. It's a very exciting time.
Yep, absolutely. Those are great, exciting new choices. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Sure. Traditionally, Maryland politics has benefited what is described as the middle temperament. Sadly, that has not been on display in sort of two recent incidents. And picking up on what Mike said, there was a letter from the Black Ministers Conference, which attacked part of the whole school superintendent selection process that attacked, at least by the Post accounts, Mark Elridge and Tom Hucker for racism. And then there is also the incident, if you will, of Delegate Dan Cox calling for the impeachment of Governor Hogan over issues that he disagrees with. I think Governor Hogan says it best for both sets of incidents, and they're both examples of what happens when crazy meets stupid.
Well, thank you, Mark. I avoided mentioning Delegate Cox's comments or proposal in our show today because I thought he must be from Planet Trump
He is.
to make such a proposal. But I am so relieved, and I say this with all sincerity. I counted up the number of times in our show. We do about 23 shows. No, we do about 43 shows a year. And I would say that we've had probably 75 shows on COVID over the last 2 years. And it would be nice to talk about what's going on in the General Assembly, because there are some important issues going on there, as well as before our county council. And of course, our meat and potatoes is always politics and elections. And we're looking forward to discussing that in the upcoming, as the primaries are coming up in June. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's Hardest Hit Talk Show. I also want to thank our panelists, Mark Uncapher and Mike Knapp, for being here and giving up their time. So for Casey Aiken, I'm 21 this week.